shadows in the home. The house was silent in the way only a home filled with fear could be silent. Amara pressed her back against the cold wooden wall, trying not to make a sound. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters, but inside, the real storm was Daniel. His footsteps pounded across the floor, each step a drumbeat of dread that made her chest tighten. She clutched Lila, her newborn daughter, to her chest, feeling the fragile warmth of the baby against her own trembling hands. Daniel's voice slashed through the shadows. "Where is she?" His words were not a question, but a command, dripping with menace. Amara's mind raced. She had hidden Lila beneath the threadbare blanket in the corner, hoping her father wouldn't notice, hoping her mother's screams would not wake him. But hope felt thin, like smoke slipping through clenched fingers. Her mother, Miriam, stood frozen near the doorway, her face pale and drawn, hands trembling. Amara could see the bruises forming on her mother's forearms, remnants of Daniel's previous rage. Each mark was a silent testament to the violence that had become their daily reality. Amara's stomach churned. She had witnessed enough to know that Daniel's anger was escalating. Today, it was no longer words, no longer threats. Today, it was far worse. Daniel entered the room, his shadow stretching long and distorted across the floor. His eyes, dark and unyielding, scanned the space, pausing on the faint outline of the blanket in the corner. Amara's heart lurched. She held her breath, willing herself to disappear into the floorboards. Lila whimpered, and the sound felt impossibly loud in the oppressive air. "Stop hiding her!" Daniel barked. His hand shot out to strike Miriam, who shrank away instinctively. Amara's fists clenched. She wanted to intervene, to scream, but fear rooted her to the spot. Every muscle screamed at her to move, to protect, but she was a child herself, caught between helplessness and urgency. Miriam tried to shield Lila, stepping forward, but Daniel shoved her violently against the wall. The baby cried, tiny arms flailing, and the sound seemed to pierce the darkness around them. Amara's chest tightened with a raw, fierce need to act. She could not let him touch Lila, not her little sister. Not like this. In that moment, the world outside the window seemed distant, irrelevant. There was only the oppressive weight of Daniel's rage and the fragile life of the child in her arms. Amara's mind raced for solutions, for something, anything that could stop him. But the walls of the house were closing in, the floorboards threatening to betray them with every step he took. Then, a sound from the edge of the property, a horse's hooves, steady and deliberate, cut through the tension. It was subtle, almost imperceptible beneath the cries and shouts, but it made Amara freeze. She had heard that sound before, a rhythmic presence that brought an odd sense of reassurance. Someone was coming. Someone who might care. Someone who might intervene. Daniel's attention shifted, however briefly, toward the window. His lips twisted into a snarl. "Who's out there?" he demanded, his voice a low rumble. Amara felt Miriam flinch. But before Daniel could move toward the door, the front door burst open. A tall figure filled the threshold, broad shoulders framed by the morning light. Levi, the rancher, stood there, calm but commanding. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the chaos, and then they rested on Lila. "You're safe now," Levi said, his voice steady but firm. He stepped forward without hesitation, placing himself between Daniel and the family. The authority in his stance was impossible to ignore. Daniel recoiled slightly, as if struck by the certainty in Levi's gaze. Amara's hand shook as she held Lila tighter, her fear momentarily eclipsed by a fragile hope. She did not know this man, but something in him radiated strength and protection, a stark contrast to the danger that had dominated their lives. Miriam's shoulders sagged in relief, though her eyes remained wary. They had been living in terror for so long that even the hint of safety felt unreal. Levi's presence changed the room. The air, thick with fear moments before, seemed to shift, carrying with it the faint promise of protection. Amara took a tentative breath, her mind still racing, but for the first time in hours, or perhaps days, she allowed herself a sliver of hope. Lila's cries softened in her arms. almost as if the baby sensed the change. Daniel, muttering threats under his breath, retreated to the shadows. The moment passed, but the tension lingered, a reminder that danger had not vanished entirely. Yet, with Levi standing between them and the storm, Amara felt for the first time that maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. And so, with the soft rustle of blankets and the distant clop of hooves fading into the morning, the first fragile thread of hope was woven into their lives. It was enough to carry them through the day, though the shadows of the past would not be forgotten. The rancher's resolve. The morning sun slanted across the dusty ranch, cutting through the haze of fear that had hung over Amara's life like a storm cloud. She clutched Lila to her chest as Levi led them into the small, sturdy house at the edge of his property. The walls were simple, rough-hewn, but they radiated stability, a stark contrast to the chaos Amara had just escaped. For the first time, she noticed the subtle strength in Levi's movements, the way he carried himself with measured purpose, each step deliberate, confident. "You'll be safe here," Levi said, his voice low, steady, and unwavering. Amara nodded, unsure whether relief or disbelief surged through her first. She had learned that safety was fleeting, a fragile illusion, and yet, as she glanced at Lila nestled in her arms, she allowed herself to hope. Inside the house, the faint scent of leather and hay mingled with the warmth of wood stoves. Levi gestured toward a small room, its furnishings sparse but inviting. "You'll stay here. Locks on the door, and no one will disturb you," he said. There was no overbearing insistence, only calm authority, and it eased the knot of tension in Amara's chest. She felt a strange mixture of caution and trust, the kind she had not experienced in years. Levi's eyes lingered on Lila for a moment, and Amara saw something she could not name flicker across his face: tenderness. It was subtle, almost hidden behind the hard edges of his expression, yet unmistakable. He had chosen to intervene, to protect them, not out of obligation, but seemingly out of instinct. Amara's heart quivered at the thought. "Thank you," she whispered, voice barely audible, yet heavy with the weight of everything she had endured. Levi's gaze met hers, not with judgment, but with understanding. It was the first time anyone had looked at her in years without a shadow of blame or fear. Outside, the sound of hooves in the distance reminded her that Daniel might still linger nearby. The threat had not vanished, and Amara could feel the lingering tremor of fear in her limbs. Levi seemed to notice, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, grounding her. "We'll face what comes, together," he said, and she realized that those words carried the promise of action, not idle comfort. Amara's mind drifted briefly to her mother, Miriam, still trapped under Daniel's violence. Guilt gnawed at her, sharp and insistent. She had fled with Lila, but the thought of leaving her mother behind twisted something raw inside her. Levi's presence was reassuring, yet he could not erase that lingering ache. Levi seemed to read her thoughts. "We'll find a way," he said quietly. "I know him. He won't stop." His certainty was like a blade cutting through the fog of her panic. Amara clung to that certainty, desperate for any anchor. She had survived fear before, but now she had someone beside her, someone who could fight, someone she could rely on. The ranch was quiet, yet not silent. The subtle hum of life, rustling leaves, distant birds, the faint creak of stable doors, created a rhythm that contrasted with the chaos she had left behind. Amara allowed herself to notice these small details, each one a reminder that there was a world outside Daniel's shadow. Levi moved to a corner of the room, checking the windows and doors, his movements meticulous. He did not speak much, but his presence filled the space with an unspoken promise: protection, vigilance, and a willingness to act when necessary. Amara observed him, silently recognizing that his strength was not only physical but rooted in his mind, his discipline, his unwavering focus on those he cared for. Time passed in an uneasy balance of vigilance and tentative peace. Amara fed Lila, rocking her gently as Levi moved quietly around the house, ensuring no detail was overlooked. The silence between them was comfortable, not forced, filled with the subtle acknowledgement of shared purpose. She began to sense that Levi's presence was more than protection. It was a possibility, fragile and tentative, of something else. A connection beyond survival. A sudden rustle at the edge of the property made Amara's pulse spike. Levi was instantly alert, moving toward the window, eyes scanning the horizon. "No one is coming tonight," he murmured, his voice carrying calm assurance. The tension ebbed slightly, though Amara's awareness of danger remained. As night began to fall, the room filled with a quiet intimacy. Lila rested in Amara's arms, eyes fluttering shut, and Amara felt the first flicker of true safety she had known in months. Levi's presence at the doorway, quiet and watchful, offered a reassurance words could not. And though the past lingered like a shadow, Amara realized she no longer faced it alone. The chapter ended not with relief, but with anticipation, a sense that while the immediate danger had eased, the storm was far from over. And somewhere deep within, Amara understood that her life, her heart, and her daughter's future were intertwined with Levi's, whether she was ready or not. Bound by shadows and trust, 800 words. The first chill of evening crept across the ranch, carrying with it the scent of earth and distant pine. Amara rocked Lila in her arms, the soft weight of the baby grounding her, though her mind refused to settle. The events of the past day swirled through her like a storm she could not escape. Daniel's shadow lingered in her thoughts, a constant reminder of fear and betrayal. Yet, beside her, Levi moved with a calm authority that suggested control over forces she could not yet imagine. Amara studied him carefully. His hands, callous from work, moved efficiently, securing doors and checking the perimeter. There was a quiet intensity in the way he assessed the world, an instinctive vigilance born from experience. He did not speak much, yet every movement radiated reassurance. For the first time, Amara wondered if someone could truly embody safety, if trust could exist without words. The quiet of the ranch seemed to amplify the sound of Lila's soft coos, each one a fragile beacon of life amidst lingering tension. Amara could feel her heart shifting, subtle and unbidden. Levi's presence was no longer merely protective. It was a tether, anchoring her amidst uncertainty. She caught herself watching him as he worked, noticing the way his brow furrowed slightly when concentrating, the faint curve of his jaw as he surveyed the horizon. Small details, yet they brought her comfort. "I don't know how to do this," Amara admitted quietly, more to herself than anyone else. How to protect her, how to keep her safe, how to even trust again. Levi's gaze softened as he turned toward her, his stance relaxed but steady. "You don't have to do it alone," he said. His voice was deliberate, careful, yet carried an undercurrent of certainty. "You've already done everything a mother can do. Now, let me carry the rest with you." Amara felt the pull of emotion, a mixture of relief and hesitation. The instinct to cling to her independence warred with a deeper, primal understanding. She was no longer alone in this fight. But trust, fragile and raw, was difficult to grant. The memories of Daniel's betrayals, anger, broken promises, physical abuse, were lodged deep within her, and each one demanded vigilance. She glanced toward the horizon, where the darkening sky hinted at threats unseen. Levi moved closer, kneeling to meet her gaze without intruding, careful to respect the space between fear and acceptance. "I've faced men like him before," he said quietly. "They thrive on control, but they can be stopped, and we will stop him before he can harm you or Lila again." His tone was calm, yet unyielding. Amara drew in a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, feeling a flicker of hope ignite. Hours passed in quiet routines, punctuated by subtle gestures of care. Levi taught her how to secure the house, how to observe the horizon for approaching danger, and most importantly, how to breathe amidst chaos. The lessons were practical, but they carried an unspoken message. She was capable, resilient, and not alone. Amara found herself listening, absorbing, and allowing a fragile trust to grow. Yet, even as hope emerged, fear lurked at the edges of her consciousness. Each snap of a twig outside, each sudden rustle in the brush, reminded her of Daniel's potential return. She could not ignore the possibility that safety was temporary, that the past might claw its way back. Levi seemed to sense this unease, offering reassurance without words, standing watch in the shadows with a readiness that spoke louder than any promise. Night descended fully, painting the ranch in shades of deep blue and silver. Amara tucked Lila close, feeling her daughter's breath warm against her cheek. Levi remained at the window, vigilant, yet his presence no longer felt intimidating. It was protective, a quiet declaration that even in darkness, they would endure. "I don't know what comes next," Amara whispered, voice tinged with both vulnerability and determination. Levi's gaze softened, meeting hers briefly before returning to the horizon. "Whatever comes, we face it together," he said. His words were simple, but they carried weight, threading a fragile bond between them. Trust born of necessity, tempered by mutual respect, and beginning to evolve into something deeper. As the wind rustled through the trees and the ranch settled into an uneasy peace, Amara allowed herself a moment to breathe, to imagine a future where fear did not dominate every thought. She understood, even if only subconsciously, that her life and Lila's had changed irrevocably. The road ahead would be perilous, but for the first time, she did not feel wholly alone. The chapter closed with the quiet hum of the night, a fragile promise that while danger still lurked beyond the horizon, hope and trust had begun to root themselves in the small, protective sanctuary of the ranch. And in that delicate balance between fear and courage, Amara felt the first stirrings of something she had not dared to hope for: love. The storm breaks. 800 words. Dawn broke over the ranch with a pale, hesitant light, spilling gold across the horizon and illuminating the dew-slicked grass. Amara sat on the edge of the small bed, Lila sleeping peacefully in her arms for the first time in days, and felt the fragile weight of hope settle over her. The night had been quiet, but she knew better than to believe danger had vanished entirely. Daniel's shadow still lingered, distant yet menacing, like a storm waiting to break. Levi moved with measured precision around the ranch, checking fences, reinforcing doors, and ensuring the perimeter was secure. Every motion was deliberate, yet every gesture carried an unspoken message. Amara and Lila were not alone, and he would not let harm touch them. Amara watched him, noting the subtle ease with which he combined strength and care, and felt her chest tighten with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something she could not yet name aloud. The morning calm shattered abruptly with the sound of hooves pounding the dirt road leading to the ranch. Amara's pulse jumped. The familiar dread surged through her like icy water. Levi's head snapped toward the sound, eyes narrowing, muscles coiling like a spring. "Daniel," Amara whispered, a tremor in her voice, clutching Lila closer. Levi nodded without speaking, his hand brushing against hers in a silent promise. "Stay inside. Lock the door. I'll handle this," he said, voice low but firm. There was no hesitation in his tone, no room for doubt. Amara drew in a steadying breath, feeling the first true reassurance she had known in weeks. Outside, Daniel's arrival was chaotic. He flung himself off his horse, fists shaking, rage searing through every movement. His eyes, dark with fury, searched for them, and when they met Levi's, the world seemed to narrow to two forces: destruction and protection. Levi stepped forward, unflinching, his presence like a wall against the storm. "You won't touch them," Levi said, each word deliberate, unwavering. "Not today. Not ever again," Daniel snarled, lunging forward, but Levi's movements were precise, controlled, and almost effortless. The fight was swift, a dance of power and survival, but Levi's strength was undeniable. Every strike Daniel attempted was met with resistance. Every advance countered with a skill that left no doubt who held the advantage. Amara, still inside, pressed Lila to her chest, the sound of the struggle sending shivers through her. Minutes stretched like hours, but finally Daniel staggered back, defeated. Not broken, but powerless against Levi's resolve. Levi did not gloat, did not celebrate. He simply ensured the threat was neutralized, his eyes scanning for any lingering danger. Then, finally, he turned toward the house, his expression softening as he saw Amara and Lila waiting. Amara's breath caught as he approached, each step a reassurance, a silent declaration that they were safe. She opened the door, letting the morning light spill into the room, and for the first time, she allowed herself to meet his gaze fully. "You're safe now," Levi said, kneeling to meet her eyes. His voice was calm, steady, yet carried a warmth that made the tension of the past weeks seem distant, almost surreal. Amara's chest tightened as she nodded, her fingers brushing against his hand, a subtle acknowledgement of trust, reliance, and something deeper. Lila stirred in her arms, reaching out toward Levi, and the connection between the three of them, fragile yet undeniable, filled the room with quiet warmth. In the aftermath, Amara reflected on the storm they had weathered. Fear had been constant, betrayal had been searing, but it had brought her to this moment. A sanctuary carved from chaos, a life anchored in protection, and the first true sense of safety she had ever known. Levi's presence was more than a shield. It was a promise, an unwavering commitment to stand beside her and her daughter, no matter what came next. The day stretched on, peaceful now, and Amara allowed herself to envision a future unshackled from terror. She moved through the small house, tending to Lila, feeling the soft brush of sunlight on her face, and in the quiet, she recognized something she had thought lost: hope. And beside her, Levi worked silently, a steady, constant presence, the embodiment of strength and care. As night approached again, Amara held Lila close and looked toward Levi, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Words were unnecessary. Their bond spoke in gestures, in glances, in shared breaths. They had endured, survived, and emerged from the darkness into light. And in the quiet of the ranch, with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of night birds, Amara understood the truth. Love could be born from fear, trust could rise from betrayal, and together they could face whatever storms the future held. The chapter, in their immediate journey, closed with the promise of resilience, protection, and the fragile, radiant spark of love that had been kindled amidst the shadows.